And with Pope Francis, sometimes it's hard to tell why these particular countries at this particular time. And you're right, 87 years young, Pope Francis, with recent health complications. Even in the past number of years, as I've covered the Vatican, I've watched him go from walking up and down the stairs of airplanes as he goes on his papal trips to now in these countries using a lift in a wheelchair. So it's getting more and more difficult for the Holy Father to make these journeys. And yet, here we are, the 20,000-mile round trip to Singapore, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and East Timor. In each country, he's going to encounter a different Catholic church, and there are different reasons why he's going to each one. You take, for example, Indonesia, where he's already been, Muslim-majority country. Yes, there are 29 million Christians, and that sounds impressive, but then you compare it to the 242 million Muslims. His big theme there, of course, was inter-religious dialogue and connecting with the Islamic faith. In fact, when he went to the cathedral, the main cathedral in the capital, Jakarta, right across the road is the National Mosque. He went across, he met the Grand Imam, and they both denounced religious extremism. Another interesting thing, because I went to these countries just a few weeks ago to produce a documentary for EWTN, and when I met the Cardinal there, I asked him, what are the big issues in society here that the Pope may or may not speak on? And what they told me again and again was government corruption. In fact, the Cardinal, the head of the church there, told me Indonesia would be a prosperous country if it wasn't for corruption. And yesterday, when speaking in the cathedral, Pope Francis went off his pre-prepared speech, his script, and he made a joke saying that, the devil can sometimes enter through the pockets, which got a great laugh from the crowd there. And he said, it's true. So that's the big issue in Indonesia. Yesterday, he touched down in Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. The issues there are different. We expect that he will focus on climate change and global warming. They suffered a devastating landslide back in March. 2,000 people died. But not only that, when I went there last week and I spoke to the Cardinal, he was telling me that the recent instability, the recent violence, the crime rates, and the vicious tribal fighting in some of the highland areas, that's the big issue there. Then East Timor, one of the newest nations in the world, got its independence in 2002. He'll be reaffirming them in their faith. And then Singapore, the most affluent and vibrant when it comes to a booming economy, a country of the entire trip. The problem there, much different than the other three countries in that the faith is waning. People, the more they seem to prosper and the economy booms, the less time people seem to have for the faith, and the numbers are dropping off. So he's hoping to reignite the faith when he goes to Singapore.
Colm, you said that you did travel to some of these countries just before the Pope got there. We know that the church is facing dwindling numbers in the West in particular. Why do you think Catholicism is still so strong across Asia?
That's a great question. And, as you said, and you're correct in saying it, in the West, Catholicism and religion in general, organized religion, is declining. I was in Africa recently, in Kenya and Uganda. The church is booming. And when I interviewed a bishop there, as a little side note, he said, we have a problem of vocations. And I said, you have a problem of vocations, the same in Europe? He said, no, we have too many. We have nowhere to put them. So that's the problem they have. Similar to Asia, when I interviewed the president of East Timor, President Ramos Horta, he told us that during their bloody and brutal occupation, Indonesian occupation, where hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and this was from 1975 to 1999, so this is living memory for people. He said to me, the president, that if it wasn't for the Catholic Church, schooling people, providing hospitals, saving lives, speaking out, the visit of Pope John Paul II, he went to the country when it was under occupation, he said he doesn't think that they would have the nation today. So the Catholic Church is seen as a force for good in these parts of the world. A much different case, as you know, in other parts. Yeah.
Colm, we're just running out of time, but I want to get to this question. Pope Francis has had to deal with, during his papacy, during issues of historic sexual abuse allegations against the church, issues of homosexuality and inclusiveness. He's been very diplomatic about these very sensitive, controversial topics. I wonder what the perception is behind closed Vatican doors of how he's dealing with these issues.
Yeah, that's a great question, Fauzia. And a legacy is in the eye of the beholder. When Pope Francis became the Pope in 2013, there were two things he said he wanted to clean up in the Vatican. One was the Vatican finances. Cardinal George Pell from Australia was brought over to tackle that. That's another story. But then the second thing was the child abuse, which was just really breaking. It had broke under Pope Benedict XVI. He resigned, but then Pope Francis was kind of left to clean up the mess. He started the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, this Vatican department to implement safeguarding measures. But it depends on who you ask. In my home country of Ireland, right now, as we sit here, there are more scandals breaking about abuse in the Christian Brothers schools. I went to a Christian Brothers school myself. In some parts of the world, they seem happy that the issue has been dealt with. The church has paid compensation. It has apologised. The Pope went to Canada, apologised for what happened in the residential schools there. In other parts of the world, they're still going through it. But here's the thing. As I've travelled across Africa and Asia, stories of abuse haven't broken there yet. And if you were to think they haven't been happening there, you may be foolish. So the thing in the Vatican is that if people think that this is kind of done or coming towards an end, that in other parts of the world, these stories, sadly in the future, could still be about to break.